right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another LFG Live. So today we are still in our March 2026 hiring and team structure series. Of course, you know all of the previous months are available on my YouTube channel. January was Foundations and Clarity, February People and Leadership series, and now we are in hiring and team structure. Today we are talking about the true cost of a bad hire. So let me actually turn my heater off because anybody in the East Coast or New Jersey right now knows the weather just isn't sure what the heck it's doing. So I wasn't sure if I was hot, cold, whatever I am. But let's keep rolling. What probably was making me a little more warm though is, as you guys know, my afternoon tea. Today is this is Harney and Sons Fine Teas Black Cask Bourbon. No, there's no bourbon in it. Smoky black smoky black tea with vanilla and caramel. Definitely love this one. Love this brand. You can buy them on Amazon, so it's never anything crazy or expensive, but a really fun tea to have. So, of course, always share what you're drinking as well. Might add it to my list, and you might see it on one of our LFG lives. So, also want to note, today is Friday the 13th. Anybody who follows me on socials or knows me in my personal life knows that my family and I love horror, anything scary. So, Friday the 13th, of course, is on theme with that. We celebrate it like a holiday. Today, I'm actually wearing not a very work-friendly shirt, but I am wearing a shirt from a local brewery, Icarus Brewing. They did last Friday the 13th, they did a shirt and a whole event at their brewery. They're doing the same today, unfortunately today, or fortunately, because I love what I do. Have a lot of work to do, so I wasn't able to make it out, but little shout out to Icarus and Brick today. So let's get to it, team. What is the true cost of a bad hire? If you were able to either join me last week or see the video from last week, I did talk a bit about the idea of hiring bodies or putting butts in seats or however people want to phrase things when they're really talking about putting a person in place, rather than saying, I want to hire somebody who's going to be a great fit for this organization and for this role. And when we do that, we think we're actually saving time and money. I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing this. I'm going to throw them in the role. If it works, great. If it doesn't, oh well. When in reality, we're spending more money with the wrong hire in the wrong place. So bad hires don't just cost you payroll. It's not just about the amount of money that you're paying them in that period of time that they're working. There are so many other parts to that. I'm thinking back to personally some of the bad hires that I've either had or that we've seen in my organizations that I've worked with. But they cost you, of course, the payroll, but they cost you some of your best people. You know, I've actually had people leave organizations based on other people who were brought in. It's going to degrade the customer experience, right? This wrong fit is not going to be what you like to see in either your work productivity, your customer facing activity, whatever it may be. But that customer experience is going to degrade. Plus, think of the time that it's going to take, right? Think back again to potentially somebody that you worked with that wasn't right for the role. How much time did it take, not just to try to get them where they were supposed to be, but the time training, the time venting, the lack of productivity during the time that you were having to fix these things. So it's going to take up your time. It's also going to take up your confidence as a leader. When you have this employee, this person on your team who's just not doing the right thing, it's going to start to break you down a little bit. So we'll dig into that a little bit. But one of the worst parts of this is that a lot of times the people that I've worked with in the past or people I've read stories about, they don't really realize the cost of a bad hire until it's too late, until the damage is already done, until they've spent the money, they've invested the time. And that's fine. We all make mistakes. What I hate seeing, though, is making that same mistake over and over again because we're not changing anything in our path. And that's what we're here to talk about today. How do we change that? And how do we make sure that to the best of our abilities, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit at the end, how do we avoid that bad hire? So let's dig into some of the costs. So I've kind of narrowed it down, as I usually do, because we only have about 30 minutes, from the plethora of ways that we could talk about the cost of a bad hire, really down to kind of 4 main buckets to really think about. One is the time cost. That's the one I joke that people think is just free. No, it's just time. It's not an actual physical product that costs me money. It's not a computer. It's not a work van. It's simply time. That is not free. Look at your P&L. And if you're not looking at your P&L, that's another discussion that we're going to have in May. But look at your P&L. Labor is a huge expense for all of our organizations. Time cost is not free, including your own time. Your own time is not free. You should have a dollar value that you expect to spend on yourself, meaning you're not going to give yourself that money, but what your value is in the time you're going to spend on things. So when we look at the cost of bringing a hire in general, we have interviewing, we have onboarding. That's everybody, whether it's a good hire or a not great hire. The retraining, right? Somebody goes through their entire onboarding process. We have to retrain them. Correcting their mistakes. This is such a culture drain for people when we have to continuously correct mistakes. Now, again, I'm not saying that everybody isn't going to have some mistakes. You can have the most amazing person coming on board and they're going to make a mistake, and that's fine. I'm talking about mistakes as a repetitive nature of what they're doing in your business. That is going to cost a ton of your time. Managing drama. I had a bad hire come in. It was actually right before I started with an organization, and it was in the department. I was a continuous improvement manager, and I was in this particular department working on how we can kind of fix things and work on things. And they said, yeah, this guy that was just hired, and everybody in the team was so nice. They wouldn't specifically call out this guy and say he was terrible, but he was not great. And the biggest part is because he just didn't care a lot, right? And I was new, so I didn't really want to jump right in and say I didn't think this guy was the right fit, but I promise you it was within the first, and probably end of my first week, beginning of my second, that I did give that feedback. But yeah, the drama that we had to face then, because the team had to continuously fix his mistakes. Then it caused drama amongst the team. Oh, I'm the one who always has to fix this stuff. Can you go in and help? So this team who previously got along perfectly and is now debating and arguing who's going to kind of clean up after this guy who really could care less about doing his own fixing. And he didn't become this way through bad culture. He was literally hired a few days before I was brought into the company. So this is just who he was. So that was definitely a bad hire. And then again, coaching the same issues repeatedly over and over and over and over and over and over are going to show just a lack of that person's either ability to grasp it. Doesn't make them a bad person, right? There's certain people who are never going to grasp Excel spreadsheets. I talk about this often. If you ask me to draw a picture and you teach me over and over again to draw a picture, it's never going to look good. It's just not in my skill set, right? So, but that's not what I'm talking about, right? That is what I'm talking about are those folks who are just in the wrong positions or just don't want to be there. So we're having to correct the same issue repeatedly. So what I need us to remember for that first item that we're talking about, that first bucket, is that you as the owner, you as the manager, you as the, whoever is on this call, the CEO, your time is not free. Manager time is not free. That yes, we are here to invest in our people. That's always going to be people, process, profit. That's my number one. But we have to be sure we're investing in the right people, the right fit for our company. Then let's look, that was kind of the indirect cost, the labor cost, right? Let's look at the direct cost. Wages, what we're paying them. However much they're making an hourly or salary, it's that money. It's the taxes. It's the benefits. When they start, I'm sure they get tools, uniforms, maybe even a computer depending on their role, right? Software, even if they're using their own computers. If you used any sort of recruiting, which could be as grand as some of the big like Vision Sparks and giant organizations I've seen, to just your subscription fee or your monthly for a ZipRecruiter or an Indeed, but that costs money. Any additional pay that you might be paying your existing team to help that person, right? You may be having your team kind of train them. Are you paying them overtime? Are you paying them extra hours to do so? So those are all the direct money costs. And remember, when we talk about somebody's wages, when we add all of those things up, if somebody makes, just I'm going to throw out an easy $25 an hour, if they make $25 an hour, that's not what you're paying them. That's what they're getting, but that's not what you're paying for that employee, right? All those other things, when we add them on, depending on your industry and what you provide for your teams, it could be anywhere from, on the really low end, an additional 10% on top of that. On the higher end, it could be 25, 50% additional if you're really a robust organization giving a lot of benefits to that person. So we want to keep those costs in mind, that we want to be selective with those. Who do we want to have all these advantages? And it's certainly not going to be that wrong fit for our organization. Third of the fourth bucket that I want to talk about is our culture cost. This one is a big one for me because it is harder to get back than those first two items, right? If you've already spent the money, you paid this person for 2 weeks of their time, that money is spent, it's gone. You're never going to get it back. But week 3, if you've let them go because you've determined now they're not a right fit for the company, those 2 weeks of money is spent and it's over, right? Now you kind of go back to the drawing board and start over again. The culture impact of the wrong hire, though, may take even longer to come back from. So when you have those teammates who are the wrong fit for the organization, who aren't necessarily doing the right thing, they are going to negatively impact those around them, even if they have a great environment. I talked about that teammate that joined a team right before I did and kind of the impact he had on the people around him. But think of the opposite, where I picture that guy as kind of a passive, just kind of sat back, didn't really do his job very well. Way before that, though, in February, I talked about another employee out in one of my Pennsylvania markets that was kind of overly aggressive. They weren't really great at their job, but they were bold. They were loud. They were good at certain things, not good at other things, right? And what happened to the culture at that point? my amazing employees, my long-term employees, my rock stars and my superstars, they weren't happy anymore. So what happens now? So if we have these employees, let's say I'm working in a retail store and I have 10 employees there, right? And I have 10 employees and I have a bunch of them that are absolutely amazing. They're always operating at 80 to 100% capacity of what they can do. Everyone's not at 100% every day, as much as we'd like to think that. We're just not. But now you have this bad hire that came in and that culture is degrading. Now, not only is this bad hire not doing the right thing, everybody else, that 80 to 100% you were getting out of them every day, that's dropping. That's dropping. That's dropping. So now not only do you have this bad hire not performing, but everybody else in that environment, their performance is dwindling because they're just not happy, right? They have resentment towards this new hire. Why do they get to be late? Why do they get to make all these mistakes, right? I guess it's okay that we're making all these mistakes for our customers now. I guess our quality of business has changed, or I'm not doing this anymore and I'm leaving. I'm doing my job and I do my job well and I've done my job for years well, and now I have to clean up after this guy. Not doing this anymore. I'm out. So that culture cost for me, even though it's number 3, is probably one of the biggest ones for me because it's hardest to come back from, and it impacts not just the business from a financial perspective, but it's going to impact all the other people. And we know that people are always going to be my number 1. And then the last is going to be kind of the obvious one, is that customer cost. I'm trying to think of another industry that I've worked with. Let's think about the green industry. If we have a landscaper that goes out to somebody's home and I have had this happen in one of the businesses I was in, goes to a business and they only use a weed whacker. Now, weed whacker is obviously a part of our business, but this particular client said, hey, I have some weeds that need to be kind of pulled from these areas that I want them pulled out by the root. The customer specifically requested this, and I remember it. And our hire went there and just weed whacked it again. We're like, no. We need you to do it the way the client asked because they keep coming back quickly. We need them pulled from the root in this one particular area. The customer's paying us a good amount of money to get this done. And he just refused to. We obviously didn't know it until we did our quality checks after. But at that point that we had done the quality checks, the client already saw it wasn't done the way that they wanted it. So, of course, client not happy. So when we have somebody who's not a right fit for our business, that bad hire is going to miss deadlines, have sloppy work, poor communication skills. You're going to see bad Google reviews, which we know, not good. I have another session about Google reviews. I think that's happening over the summer. Not just Google reviews, but your entire online presence. But those are rough. Refunds for services, right? They really mess something up and you have to give some money back to try to make things right. And then a real bad one for me, because I love the loyalty aspect of everything we do, is losing the repeat business. You have a client that has come back to you time and time again. We have this bad hire that just didn't do it right. And they think, well, I guess this business who I've loved for all these years just isn't doing it right anymore. So I'm going to go find somebody else. So again, looking at kind of the 4 buckets I narrowed everything into, there are certainly a lot more. 4 buckets of a bad hire cost. We look at the time. We look at the direct money cost. We look at the culture cost. We look at the customer cost. So think about it like an invoice you're going to pay for each new hire that you bring on, right? And the hidden invoice that you pay, when you keep the wrong person for too long, your best employees become the babysitter instead of doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? Because they care about the company. That's the great part. And you're probably looking at them going, look how much Sally cares. She's bringing the new hire under her wing and really fixing everything that new hire is doing. Well, Sally was your number 1 performer before. She needs to get back to doing the job that she was doing, not babysitting that new hire. I'm not talking about training. I'm not talking about side-by-side onboarding. I'm talking about true babysitting, meaning they should be doing what they're doing on the timeline, and they're not there yet. Your manager avoids conflict. Your manager gets cynical about things. You stop delegating, which is a huge component of being able to grow your business, is being able to delegate, but you stop delegating because you can't trust anyone to get it done right. You start micromanaging things, but you call it quality control, right? Because so many things are going wrong. You just want to be on top of everything, but that's really going to turn into micromanaging because you have to do it that way. And then you're going to lose momentum in growing your business. And, I talk about growth, meaning it could be growth in size of your business, could be growth in quality, could be growth in product mix. It just could be growth in cleaning things up. That's all growth to me. But you're going to lose momentum in that growth because everything is a problem. You have to go fix everything. There's no time to actually be thinking about and strategically planning the next steps in your business because you are so busy fixing the problems of today. So those bad hires, they don't only change, or they don't only kind of take up your resources, take up your money, your time, and things like that. They actually wind up changing how you lead your business. Sorry, guys, allergies are a little bothering me today. I'm talking about that weather earlier. But yeah, it changes how you actually lead your business, and that's going to be, quite honestly, the most expensive part. You as a leader in your business, you got the company there, right? You created it, you grew it, and if we can't have you in the business anymore, you at least running or guiding that business because you're so involved in the little micromanaging details, that's going to be the biggest expense to our business. So I know I already told a few stories about some of the bad hires that I've seen in history, but I want to talk about a few more examples that I've seen in the past. So the one was, I want to call this one the charmer. The charmer. That's the one that interviewed super well. They were perfect in the interviews. They're friendly. They say all the right things. They do everything during the interview that they're supposed to do. They have you laughing. They have you engaged. But then they don't follow your processes. They're always the exception. Oh, yeah, but I'm going to do it a little differently. I didn't do it that way. Or they create little pockets of drama within your organization. And for some reason, the owner keeps them because maybe they're good with people. Maybe they make them laugh. Maybe they just, again, it's the charmer. They have that charming attitude. But meanwhile, the team is going to view that as, our standards of our business are optional as long as you're likable, as long as you're cool. It kind of becomes that popularity contest, right? Versus the idea of who is actually going to get the job done. So when we have somebody like that who's not doing the right thing, even if they're a little bit likable, even if they're kind of charming, not going to be a right fit for the business. And I have seen that in the past. So when I talk about that, I'm talking about in the interview process and in the onboarding process. Make sure we're not just glazing over based on their personality. Make sure that we're asking true questions, which I'll go through in a moment, about how they would handle their job. The second one is, I guess we can call it the slow bleed. So it's nothing big. It's nothing dramatic. It's just some consistency maybe in their lateness, their sloppiness, their forgetfulness. Maybe they're not quite hitting goal, but there's almost somebody worse, right? You kind of, if everybody is performing at a 10 out of 10, and this person is there, then maybe we'll address it. But because everybody's not performing at a 10 out of 10, there's always somebody a little bit worse. We kind of leave them on board. Well, that means we're paying the same problem every week. And I know it's hard. I know it's hard to focus on the big fires and the big engagement fires and the big employee problems and end those at the same time, those slow bleeds. But we absolutely need to be addressing those slow bleeds too, because when it drags on for months, again, think of that productivity loss that we're having. If that's not 100% employee, that's not even close to 100% employee, it's dragging. It's costing money, and it's slowly chipping away at your company culture. So how do we avoid this? Now, I want to put a little asterisk on this, like I always do, and say that realistically, I've hired, it had to be thousands of people. I mean, if you look at the retail turnover, me being with my one retail organization, Express Stores, for over 20 years, we had 4,000 employees roughly. Thousands of employees that I've worked with and interviewed. Some are going to sneak through, right? Some are going to be those bad hires that they just sneak through for whatever reason. Their interview could have been perfect, their onboarding perfect. But with these tips, it's absolutely going to help you weed through some of those people who aren't going to be right for your business. And what you really need to do first is strategize. You need to think about this before you even get into those interviews or even start the interviews. You want your job posting to be reflective of the thoughts that you have here. And the first is define what right looks like. If you can define what that role scorecard is going to look like, what are their outcomes you're looking for? What are their weekly expectations? What does right look like? What does good look like? What does excellent look like in that role? You are going to be able to write the job description appropriately and interview appropriately for that. Again, it then just doesn't become somebody that is a smiling face across the desk from you while you're interviewing or over Zoom or over the phone. It becomes somebody truly you can interview based on the actual job description. And I know that sounds silly saying it. Of course, if we're hiring somebody, we know what that job is, but not always. It may just be, hey, we're hiring an irrigation installer. Okay, well, does he know irrigation? Fine, hire him. No. What does right look like? What does our company's right look like? Make sure we're hiring the right person. That brings us to number 2 of my 5 steps to helping prevent a bad new hire. And that is screen for values before skill. And actually next week, March 20th, my entire session is about that. So I'm not going to go too far in the weeds on this today. But if you find the right person with the right values first, then the skills, you're going to be able to ensure that you're bringing somebody on board that's going to align with your organization. Like the example I just said, we can't just say, oh, you know how to do this? Great, join the company. No, we want to make sure that they align with who you are as an organization, who your people are. So we would ask questions such as, tell me about a time you got feedback you didn't like. Tell me about a time you made a mistake. Tell me about a time that you couldn't meet a deadline. And again, I don't, during my interviewing process, which I can certainly coach on, we don't ask these questions that directly. I don't like them to be a Q&A. I like them to be a conversation. But those are the kind of questions that will evaluate their values, who they are, before just understanding their skills. Step 3 is using a work sample. So this one, right now when I'm working with a lot of home services businesses, this really does work well for me. But have them do something quick, easy, not a whole day project, but do something easy like writing a customer response, not engaging with a real customer, but an example of engaging with a customer. If your business, I talked about irrigation a moment ago, if they're hired to do an estimate for a client for a new irrigation system install, have them look at a site survey that somebody already did and have them kind of walk through that estimate with you. If there's a certain checklist that your organization use, have them go through that checklist. So have them actually do something that's within your organization and how you do things, because you're going to get a feel for them. And it's not going to be perfect. They're going to be nervous. It's going to be a little awkward because it's not real life, but it's going to give you a sense of who they are and can they really get that job done. Step 4, this is a funny one for me because I believe in it somewhat, doubt it somewhat. So I'm going to say this always matters. I was going to take it off my list. I added it on because other people have told me they use it consistently. I took it off because I have a great feeling about it, but I put it back on. But reference checks that actually matter. And the reason I put it back on is because I know that when you do a reference check for somebody, they can't really give negative feedback, right? So at that point, I'm calling to hear the positive feedback. What's the point? I don't need somebody just kind of being a cheerleader. However, you can ask certain questions, and don't take any of what I'm saying on this call as legal advice or HR advice by any means. That's a whole different call that you and I can have together. But certain questions that we want to ask during that reference that may be a little more relevant and legal to ask them to get some information from them. It also is going to be helpful to understand those references that they give you, right? To see how many do they give? Are they free with them? Are they hesitant with them? It gives you a feel for that. So I'm going to leave the reference checks on there. I do have a guide on some of the questions that are legal to ask, and I'm not going to say them here because it could be state differences and all that. And you do want to be careful with what you ask, and also on the opposite side, what you say if somebody calls you for a reference. But step 4, reference checks that actually matter. And then step 5, we're going to talk about this at the end of the month on March 27th, but have a ramp plan, have an onboarding plan. We hear so often that we hire people and just throw them with our best employee and hope that works. Your best employee may not be a trainer. Your best employee may not know how to onboard somebody. We had the last company I was with, Auto Image, company around since 1987. We had our best guy, best at everything. I mean, best at sales. And a lot of times the same people that sell aren't the people that are in the back doing the actual installs, right? This person can sell, they can install, they can do everything there. Fantastic human being. And we brought a new hire on and asked him to train her. We didn't have an onboarding path. We had nothing at the time. And she failed. And when we sat down with this person, he's like, I didn't realize how hard it was to actually get somebody to learn stuff. So training, teaching, to all you trainers and teachers out there, it is a skill in itself. Being a subject matter expert does not make you a great trainer. So have an onboarding plan. Now, I'm not saying that you're not going to partner those people. For example, you may have an onboarding plan that says, you're going to be with your guide or coach for this amount of time. I want you to go spend an hour with so-and-so in the front of house to see how they do things. Come back and then talk to me about it as a trainer. Not every organization can afford a full-time trainer. That's fine as well. Maybe you have somebody in the company who has a knack for that sort of thing, and you can give them kind of a guide to help through that. A lot of things that we can customize to do that, but you cannot just have no plan, throw them to the wolves and expect to have something great, because then you're not hiring, you're hoping. And hope is not a strategy. Thank you, Ken. So when we think about our bad hires, I want you to really think about what's the most expensive bad hire you've ever had. Not the most stressful, not the one who made you curse and scream and yell when you walked away at the end of the day, but what's the most expensive bad hire you've ever made? And was it time, money, culture, or all three? And if it was culture, which is the one that kind of scares me the most, What did you do to get that culture back? And if it's been recent and you haven't worked to get that culture back, what are we going to do together to get you there? Do you keep people on too long just because you hate conflict and hate those hard conversations, which we've talked about? And do you have a role scorecard for your next hire? Yes or no? And if the answer is no, let's get on that. So, team, really all I have for today. I do want to say what's funny is if you know me well, you know I've had the entire year mapped out. Actually, I have it up on my screen in case I need to reference it. The entire year of what the series is for the month, what each Friday is, which topic we're talking about. So I've had this as the true cost of a bad hire scheduled since December. But I come home this week and I have my irrigation and lighting magazine came in, which I already mentioned. I was in the green industry for quite some time, which is why LFG and Leardon Studio actually work a lot with people in the green industry and home services industry because of that experience. But I'm looking through it, and one of the articles that I pop up from a Mr. Tom Borg is actually the same thing. A bad hire costs more than you think. And in reading through it, I went back and forth kind of on some of my notes that I had for today in my outline. A lot of this stuff was exactly the same, right? Untrained employees develop poor attitudes, poor onboarding process, frustrate your existing team. Employee benefits and overhead. He talks about salary is only part of what you pay for a new hire. Benefits, health insurance, retirement contributions, paid time off, other perks can raise total compensation by 20 to 40% or more. Add workspace, equipment, uniforms, vehicles, tools, software, utilities, and the cost continues to grow. So exactly what I said about not just looking at that hourly rate, but looking at the whole cost. Now, the reason I bring this up, probably because I thought it was a nice, short, easy to read, but to the point article. One thing I didn't put in my notes, so I wanted to make sure I gave him credit before I talked about it, Mr. Tom Borg, is that perhaps the most overlooked expense is turnover. If a new employee leaves within the first year, you have to start the process all over again. Estimates show that replacing an employee can cost between 50% and 200% of their annual salary, depending on the role. High turnover doesn't just drain finances, it also damages customer relationships and team morale. So 50 to 200% of their annual salary in that turnover when we're taking an employee that we have and having to replace them. So yeah, definitely a lot of cost on that bad hire. Kind of looping back to the beginning, I hear people say all the time, they think they're saving money by shortening the processes because they're not spending a lot of time interviewing, not spending a lot of time training, but it's not saving any money. It's degrading the quality. It's degrading the team experience. It's degrading the culture. So again, let's make sure that we're focused on that. For sure, if you want any of my bad hire prevention checklist, I have role scorecards, interview questions, onboarding, which of course would have to be customized for each business. But I have our major steps that we would want to hit me up. You can reach me, text, email, my website, my socials. And again, next week, we're going to be talking about hiring for skill versus values, which we kind of touched on a little bit today, but we want to make sure we're not picking the wrong thing first. Also want to say again, happy Friday the 13th today. Happy St. Patrick's Day next week. And then, Thursday is a happy birthday to my little Amani. She'll be turning 7 years old, our youngest. So excited for that. So a big week of celebrations this week. But until next week, team, finish your drink, take a deep breath, and go lead with intention today. Thanks so much, everyone.